Welcome to the Baer Faxt webinar. We're here at Sotheby's. Part of our conversation will be about the state of the $1 million plus art market as done by the Sotheby's art market and our tactic. Most of you know me that I'm one of these OGs, been around the art world forever, but I'm joined by two of my favorite people in the art business. A generation of women that are exceptional in their knowledge and love for art and their ability to make deals. And they're really two of the people out there, if you're not paying attention to who knows what's going on, these are the two that I come to and count on. So I'll let them introduce each other.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks,
that was
Josh.
a wonderful introduction. I'm going to introduce Liz Sterling. Liz Sterling is a former colleague of mine at Sotheby's, but also worked at Christie's in the past, and now is an independent art advisor and dealer.
And this is Jackie Wachter, Vice Chairman at Sotheby's, who is a dynamo at private sales, but also very involved in the 20th and 21st century auctions.
So we thought now we actually have a data point from last night from the sales at Christie's, the first one of, I think it's 6 evening sales and about 10 sales across the 2 weeks of over $2 billion worth of art going on sale. What did you think about what happened last night, ladies?
I think one thing that I was refreshed to see was the classic material that was of a certain caliber and freshness, such as the Rousseau and also the Danforth material, performed incredibly well. So there's clearly still connoisseurship in the market, and even though so often contemporary works are really the ones that are grabbing the headlines, that area of sector is still incredibly strong, over $1 million.
Liz, if you don't know, has a very strong background in American art, so she's like rooting hard for the Georgia O'Keeffe.
O'Keeffe, oh my God, there we go.
21 million.
No, but I completely agree with you. I mean, I thought that the results were, they were spotty. There were moments where, like the Rousseau, like the O'Keeffes, which, were incredibly impressive. And then there were other moments that were a little bit softer. And I think that we're definitely seeing the importance of having low estimates. I think in certain situations where the estimates were a little bit pushed, the results kind of felt a little less strong, but actually maybe the work sold for what it was supposed to sell for, but it seemed kind of tepid against what was like a bit of a pushed estimate.
Are we a bit nonplussed at $550 million worth of art sold and no one's like jumping up and down? Is
Maybe
a little bit interesting.
Right. I remember at Christie's when, the Impressionist on sale hit 200 million, hit 300 million, hit 400 million, how exciting that was. And it's true, particularly I think on the heels of Macklowe and Paul Allen, where we become used to these billion-dollar sales. It's true, we have become a little desensitized to what an amazing amount of money was spent last night. And we're going into a week full of sales.
Surprise for something that did exceptionally well, or to my mind, I think you could have written the results of the sale before the sale and you would have been within 10% of the actual value. Was there anything that stood out?
I mean, I was incredibly impressed by the performance of the Georgia O'Keeffes, and I was also very impressed by the Lee Bonteque result. I thought, $8.6 million against 3 to 5 was sort of, astronomical. The Black Iris making $21 million, like I didn't see that coming. The Rousseau at 43. I mean, but as you said before, like that's a once in a lifetime experience.
I love how when you're not an auction house person, you come in and they show you a picture and they say to your client, like, well, this is going to be the only time you're ever going to get a chance at this. And you go, yeah, sure. Because next year there's going to be another one. With the Rousseau, when they said, you'll never have another chance, that was true.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But it was also true about the Rocher gas station. Is there going to be another one? And that had one bid for a big amount.
But I was talking to someone this morning and I was sort of saying, yes, I was a little disappointed in that result. And he said, you know what, Jackie, it's a 30-inch painting. It's a 30-inch painting that had a big estimate, let's have a little bit of perspective. It's a 30-inch painting selling for $23 million is nothing to scoff at.
If they'd put the estimate at 10 to 15 and it sold for 23,
it
people would be jumping up and down.
Exactly.
So I often wonder if or if even it's sold for 20, to be saying what a great result.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. I think that the estimates are so important because not only do they drive, not only do we know that each additional bidder adds 30% to the hammer price, but it also really affects the mood and perception of how the sale does retroactively.
But with that painting, there might have only been one buyer. If they'd put the estimate at 10 to 15, they would have had to sell it for 10.
Right.
The same buyer would have maybe paid 12 as
It's a
did
nuance.
that. When it's a thin market for something, don't you want to have a high estimate?
Well, but
Elizabeth?
there might have been another bidder at a
Might have
lower
been.
estimate. You know what I mean? I think that definitely, it's all a bit of a mental game. If you see an estimate of 10 to 15 and you think to yourself, oh, wow, I could buy this masterpiece for $10 million. Next thing you know, you're bidding 15. But it's just about getting them in the door. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Great, but then I
interrupt
think
you.
if you look at the de Kooning from Newhouse, that was kind of the other side where it was estimate on request, but it was in the range of 25. They ended up with the guarantor and one other bidder, and it did they positioned it to really sell at the highest possible value by being so aggressive in the beginning. But one thing that I think a lot of people outside the auction world don't understand is with so many of these collections, if they are competitive, auction houses are pushed often on estimates in order to win the property. So what Jackie's best advice might be, she may not ultimately be able to give that estimate if she also wants to secure the consignment. And I think that skews the market.
Exactly.
And then it becomes a little bit the illusion of the success. Where does it fit within the estimate? Rather than, I think, to the seller, $22 million for the Rocher, that's a great price. Yeah. And so you have to dig a little deeper. And you felt that when you were here of like, what do I have to do to get the deal, right, Liz?
Well, and also you see the estimate, but then you're tacking the buyer's premium on also, which is
About
20%
200%
plus in
or what?
excess. Right.
Well, except for the fact that so much of it these days goes back to, at that level anyway, goes back to the consigners. A colleague of mine said, because yes, of course, we compete over these big collections, and he said, sometimes it feels like a race to the bottom because you're just giving up more and more and more and more money to.
So if we went back to the old days of 10% and the auction houses always kept them, that would be kind of where we started.
It'd be a great
That'd be a
business. Yeah, that would be a great business, but unfortunately, that's not where we are.
Now, were there some conclusions that we could take both from last night and in general that came out of the art market report about artworks over $1 million that you can sort of connect the dots with?
Yeah, well, I mean, sort of going back to my point about these impressive results for female artists last night, one of the things that the report talks about is how in the past 4 years or 5 years, excuse me, the percentage of female artists was 8%. It's now up to 14%, which translates from about 220 million to about 330 million. So there's been a large increase in the amount of female artists that are being sold. And, I think you really saw that last night. I think there was a lot of attention. I mean, obviously, we still have a long way to go. The fact that female artists are only making up 14% of the pie, we need. I'm very much hoping that we'll see that number increase. But that was something that was a very important takeaway for me from that report.
Do you feel that as a art market expert, an auction house person, or to what extent as a woman does that affect your feeling too? That the women are, as a woman, seeing the women artists are slowly getting in the game. When you started, did you feel like, what's going on? Why do we have 99% men in all these sales?
I mean, I certainly did. I certainly did.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice to see museums showing the Cecily Brown show, the Gago show. I mean, I think you're seeing it across all levels, not just on the commercial side, but there is this looking to expand the narrative of art history with women, people of color. I mean, a lot of these areas that were formerly excluded in some ways by curatorial and collectors' decisions, I think now we're at the moment where suddenly they are getting their due, both academically, but in the market in terms of prices.
Yeah,
now, as you come out of American painting and worked in Impressions and Modern, are there a lot of underappreciated, underrepresented women artists? Are people looking, oh my God, can I find a woman artist from the 1890s that's going to be in this role? Or are they not there because they weren't allowed to make art so much then?
I mean, you're seeing that, and obviously there's a lot of demand for Eva Gonzalez. Bart Morisot, one of which is coming up at Sotheby's this coming week. So I think you are looking at that. There are not as many, but that ties into the Man Ray portrait that's coming up in the Feinberg collection of Kiki de Montparnasse. I mean, I think that story is fascinating. That there were so many women that were involved in these circles at that time that I think they're still kind of outside of this connoisseurs. There still isn't a full appreciation. So I do think over the next 10 years we are going to see some earlier female artists come to light.
Yeah, I work with a lot of collectors who focus on artists of color. And the way that I really see it is that, we see it with women and we see it with artists of color. There's sort of this rewriting of art history that's going on to sort of include artists that were overlooked for whatever reason, for their gender, for their race. And I think that's one of the most positive things, actually, that's been happening in the art market in the past 5 to 10 years.
Do you find you're working with more and more women collectors and clients who have their own money and aren't dependent upon going to their husband to get approval for their art purchases, that are able to say, as a woman, I'm relating to their issues, I'm writing the check, I can go deeper? And also in the same way to the diversity of collectors who are collectors of color.
Yes.
Saying, I'm buying my own culture, I have the money in a way that didn't exist.
100%, I feel that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
And for me, that's a good sign that it's like leading the way in a way that's like, I can relate to that work, to the content of the work, the meaning of the work. I'm not stuck with my grandfather's history of art or MoMA's history, that we're redefining it quickly.
I also think it's especially when you're looking at like a Black collector who's sort of, creating generational wealth for his family. Maybe it's a collector who's sort of made a lot of money in his lifetime, but didn't come from a lot of money before, and is, creating these opportunities for his children, which I think.
Are there children coming to the galleries and to the auction houses to learn about art yet? Are they still too young?
I mean, a little bit young, but I actually have, it's funny that you said that. I've suggested that we do a family trip to the Getty.
Yeah, and a lot of my collectors in their early 40s are now bringing their kids with them.
But do you have more and more women clients that are
Absolutely.
And do they work more easily with women advisors, do you think, or do they not care?
I think it totally depends. I mean, a lot of them are very successful businesswomen, so I think they're equally comfortable. It just depends who they feel, I think, is going to be the best advocate for them and help them to find what they're looking for. I mean, you've
half
been huge.
of my top clients are women, and they came out of finance, and they're like a certain age that it's like, okay, boys, we're all on the trading desk together, but I've got like a bunch more commas to my name, and I'm going to do it my way. And it's really, art's a great way of showing that they've made it, and they're doing things that relate to them.
Exactly.
So, did you have a takeaway from this report?
I think a takeaway, which we'll see if it continues in the sales next week, is the 366% growth over the past 5 years in the market, over $1 million for younger artists. With all of the, the new now, the 21st century sale, I think auction houses have been very responsive to this demand, which I think partially is because the art market has been expanding. A lot of the new collectors, particularly those in Asia, don't have access to the traditional gallery system in the primary market, or they don't want to do you have to buy one and give one to a museum. So they feel more latitude at auction and they're willing to pay premiums in this category. But Josh, I actually wanted to ask you about the kind of Asian sector of the market, because you were over in Basel for Hong Kong. What's your sense, and do you think that we're going to see continued growth there, or what are you thinking?
I think they're on 10 or 15 years of being exposed to the world and art. They're learning to ask the right questions. They're much more sophisticated in the business, and you can't get by with third-rate things. Now, there is a group that's like under 30 that are buying whatever's hot and speculative, and they have driven that market kind of insane. And that's a little bit of like, they're going to learn pretty fast that wasn't the way to go. There's a lot of demand there. There's people coming in every day that are new, but it's way more sophisticated than it was 5 years ago. Jackie, you're in LA. Do you see people coming in from, you're closer to Asia than we are here in New York.
I mean, a little bit. I think that it's still, the center of the art market is still here.
And the report shows the center of business still boomers. I'm a boomer. You guys are whatever millennials.
I don't know what I am. I'm on the
You're
cusp.
not a boomer. It's like we're diminishing and all that, and it's getting younger. That one of the things that I saw that was interesting in the numbers was that in private sales, that there's still a heavy portion of impressionist private sales over $1 million.
Didn't you think the Renoir result last night was wonderful?
It was tremendous.
Yeah.
But again, it goes to quality, the rarity, the fact that it had been off the market for almost 100 years. I mean, and I think it was really interesting to see.
But does
how well it
anybody
did.
want a fourth-rate Renoir now? Who buys that stuff in the day sales?
But the Impressionist day sales are fascinating. Every season there is, I think it's because it's the most recognizable art for a lot of people who are starting to collect, and it's very easy to live with a lot of it. They're pretty pictures.
Yeah.
So.
And recognizable names.
Exactly, but the Degas pastel was so fantastic, and it sold for $5.6 million, which was a tremendous price, but it really speaks to.
When something is of excellent quality and excellent provenance and excellent condition and really, really rare and a difficult, you're not going to have that opportunity again. I think that's when you see the best results. We saw it in the Maclo collection. We saw it with Allen. I do think that in ways the art market is new and there are new people coming in, and a lot of these people have a lot to learn. But in a way, collectors are sophisticated, and when there's something really, really special, it
But how do these
flies.
things hang together? It still seems
It's hard
to say that I'm going to put that Renoir next to a Cindy Sherman in a way that's almost like old masters are coming back. It's almost easier to put an old master portrait next to a Cindy Sherman. And I feel like an energy there, whether it's through, wow, I was looking at Candy Wiley, now I want to look at back to the 17th century, that you don't quite get that blend from Impressionists.
True, but I think you could hang a Renoir next to a Cecily Brown. I mean, I think it depends what the contemporary artists are looking at and what their style is. But I do agree with you. I think old masters in general will blend a little easier. But the Degas was so modern too, right? Even though he's technically an Impressionist artist, that could hang next to a Chardin, but could also hang next to a Bryce Martin. I mean, I see that as kind of a bridge picture.
And your clients are doing that?
The smartest ones,
I would agree with that.
right?
It's hard to
do, but when it's
And you
done
have to be
well, there's
brave.
nothing better. You have to be brave.
Well, that gets me to some of the questions that we had from the audience of like how you work with collections and things like that. And I'll start with you, Jackie, in a sense of like, are there sort of changes in the sectors of the art market that you think are most significant now? And are they temporary or are they going to be long lasting? Sort of segueing into a question there.
I think I sort of started to talk about that in that, I think that when you see the growth of female artists, when you see the growth of artists of color, I think that is here to stay. I think that there's a certain degree of speculation when it comes to younger artists, and I think that some of that will fade. I mean, I do think that sort of tastes change and things kind of go up and things kind of go down. But I do think that, what we're seeing sort of with female artists and artists of color is something that is going to be long lasting.
Liz, do you always know the names of people who are lot 1 through 3 at the auction houses now and say, I've heard of that artist?
To be totally candid, not always.
Yeah, me neither.
So sometimes I see people here bidding on stuff. I say, you know who that is? They go, I don't know. It's like when you just bid $2 million for someone. So it moves so fast now.
But
How do you
often
keep up?
you see that those numbers come down after those crazy high results, because I think, I think that one of the things that happens is that as the artists produce more and more work, it becomes easier to gain access to things primary. And so after a certain amount of time, the premium goes down for what someone will pay secondary.
Now, Liz, do you have the same problem that I do? It's like you have a good relationship with a gallery. You think I've been dealing with them 10, 20, 600 years, whatever. And you call them up and you want a hot artist and they say, well, there's 710 people who have already contacted me.
Oh, I basically just had to send like a tax return to a gallery to get my client on the list for something. Absolutely. Or again, well, they can buy one, but they have to buy one for another and gift it to an institution, or they can buy one, but they have to give money. I mean, I find that that's very difficult right now, and it's frustrating for these collectors because they're very serious collectors. They put a lot of money into their collections. They feel like they've been loyal to a gallery. There's an artist that they're really interested in, and they don't have access. So that is difficult to navigate.
And that makes you auctions.
But then they'll go to auction and spend 3 times.
Yes. I also think that it's also frustrating because maybe then you don't get the one you want, or you're offered the sort of maybe not the strongest one of the show. And I think also if you're a new collector, sometimes we forget that we spend our whole day thinking about art. This is our whole life. But like a lot of collectors, particularly for me, collectors that I work with, they have day jobs. They're busy, and they want buying a painting to be fun. They don't want to have to like grovel and buy one for a museum and wait 3 years and get the one that they don't really love. That's a game
They used to walk in the
not fun
Gulf
for them.
Stream and say, here's my $60 million. They say, here's the keys. Or you go to Bulgaria, how much is that? That's
Yeah.
$400,000 for the watch.
I love those
I'll
shoes.
take it. It's taxed, send me, pay the tax, and then walk out.
Yeah, there's a
and
degree
suddenly
of
the
it
art
that's
world
like-
is like,
And
who are
ultimately,
you?
I think a lot of times it's the artists that end up suffering because it's such a turnoff for some collectors. They completely just move away from interest in that artist at all.
I
had
came
that
up with an
experience
idea
recently.
that I wrote about recently, and yesterday was really nice. One of the biggest art lawyers who works with artists came up to me and he said, you suggested that the galleries have 2 prices now, one for collectors and one for museums. He said, I'm using that idea, and I think I'm going to get artists and galleries to do that.
I think it's
so
brilliant.
that the museums can buy for themselves, be in the game, and the buy one, give one.
Well, and look, you look at Simone Lee, who left Hauser and Wirth to go to Matthew Marks. I definitely think part of that was driven by the fact that Matthew has a slower pace, and he's very focused on placing work in institutional collections and with collectors. And if that means that you're keeping the asking price down slightly to really help to build her legacy and make sure that her works are going to appropriate places, long term, I think it's going to benefit her. And I think more and more artists are becoming aware of this.
And
by the way, I don't have the answer to the problem because I understand that galleries are just trying to protect their artists, and they're just trying to put them to make sure that the work goes to the right collector and it ends up in institutions. And so I completely respect that. I want to be clear. I don't want to come off as putting down the primary galleries. I just think that from the collector's point of view, the experience can become unpleasant in a way that could drive them to a different avenue.
well, back 30 or 40 years ago when I had a gallery and I had an artist that had a waiting list of 100, it wasn't so simple because you're telling 90 people no, and they're all angry. Right. And then all of a sudden, you probably wouldn't even have heard of that artist. 30 years from now, it can go completely that way. So it's not the optimal position for the galleries either. They're saying no and losing friends a lot more often than they can say yes.
Yeah. No, I completely sympathize with the position that they're in. It's sort of unfortunate that that's how it has to work. But I think that is what leads to a strong secondary market for young artists.
Well, it's like I was talking to one of the almost mega galleries. It's like the art fairs. They're like, you can't live without them, but you also can't live with them. It's like, it's just, the auctions are part of the system. The fairs are part of the system. The actual exhibitions are less part of the system. I mean, how often do you go to a show, Jackie, in a gallery?
Not as much. Ever since I became a mother, though.
Yeah, having a 1-year-old probably.
Having a 1-year-old. I have a 1-year-old and I have a job. And
LA's hard. It's so spread out.
LA is
go to
difficult.
tickets to the
LA
LA.
How
is
many galleries a
difficult.
week do you go to, Liz?
Well, now when I was at the auction house, I didn't go to as many just because purely I didn't have as much time. But now I make it a priority. So once a week, I mean, I go to at least 5 shows a week, probably more.
That's pretty good.
New York is much easier though because you can kind of like
You go to Chelsea, you
bang,
go to
bang,
Tribeca,
bang. You
right.
could even or on the Upper East Side or whatever.
You don't need valet parking.
Yeah, exactly. And like getting stuck in traffic.
Now, another question we had, and I think applies to all of us in a sense, is like your clients, and you work directly with a lot of clients here, not just like, auction week. Do they have wish lists of what they want?
Some do, but I find often as they evolve as collectors, they move away from that wish list, which is also why I do think weeks like this in New York are fantastic because you're walking them through the fairs, you're walking them through the auctions, they're seeing the museum shows, and suddenly things that were never on their list, they start gravitating towards and expanding it. And kind of what Jackie and I were talking about earlier is I might have someone who they only want to collect contemporary, and then they see a great impressionist work they're really drawn to, and then they start going deeper and into a completely different direction. So yes, many start out with it, but I think often we don't end up there. But there are some who they're filling a house, they want their things, and then we're done.
By the way, that question came from Ron from New York. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron
Hi,
from New
Ron.
York.
He wanted to know about the wish list. What about you?
I agree with what Liz said. I think it really depends. I think, some things are hard to find. For example, like a great Carrie James Marshall, ever since the one that came up in 2018 that made $22 million.
I remember you raising your hand on that.
I did sell that painting, but another one hasn't come up. So anybody who sort of missed out on that opportunity has been looking sort of since then. It's not easy to find. So there are certain things like that are sort of great Barkley Hendricks. Those are things that are on my clients' wish list because they just don't really come up.
I find within this that I try to think the wish list of one. Okay, it's like particularly for not only for new collectors, but it's like, what have you always dreamed if you could get a work by just one artist that you've always wanted? And like, let's start there and let's look everywhere to see what's available by that artist. And if we can't get anything that's good enough historically, quality-wise, price-wise, then we move on. So for me, I like to think of the wish list as one artist at a time. So, which leads me a little bit to mentioning new artists. LeBron from Los Angeles sent in asking, how do we learn about collecting and coming into the art market for people unlike him that have been, maybe just even the last year? How does one navigate this field?
It's well, you were saying something interesting, which is like, I think Instagram is a good place to start. I think going to shows, I always tell people to come to the auctions to see, because I think with an art fair, with an auction, you can see so much and you can just at least get a sense of what your taste is,
and you
what
can
you're
actually
drawn
talk to somebody that's not sitting behind a desk ordering from Amazon, and somebody will answer your question.
100%.
Absolutely.
I think as overwhelming as an art fair can be, I think it's a great way to kind of just be like, okay, here are the 10 things that I really responded to, and sort of just start the process.
And I think not going on opening day is always good for newer collectors, because a lot of times then the dealers have more downtime and they'll sit down and talk to you about artists that you like and kind of really help to educate you in a way that doesn't cost anything. But
I think you need really a formal process of thinking, how do I get information? What magazines do I read is not even as important. Which writers do I read? Which museums do I go to? Which curators do I focus on? Which galleries can I build a relationship? And so a lot of the new collectors are really good at understanding information in a vertical way. And now it's this horizontal thing of like, there's, millions of artists and there's thousands of galleries and dozens of art fairs. It's not an intuitive process there that I think people have to reflect on and really come at it in a formal way.
But then that also goes to Jackie's point, where a lot of people, they're working all the time. So how much time do they have to really kind of focus on beginning to collect and really doing their due diligence, which I think is why advisors, there's now such a role for them in the ecosystem.
And advisors get a bad rap, I think, because they're told that they're doing the choices for the artists. You work with a lot of advisors. You're not one technically at the moment. What's your experience?
I have some really great relationships with advisors. I think the term advisor is very broad, and it can be used for someone who, like Liz, is a real advisor and is real collectors who trust her and really helps to shape collections. It can also be used for people who sort of, just kind of do deals here and there in the art world. I think I have a tremendous respect for art advisors. I think they can be a really, really helpful tool, especially for people who don't want. I mean, how many art fairs? You probably know this number. How many art fairs are there each year? Like, you can't possibly go to all of them. So
400 or 500.
I mean, right. So you can't even go to the top 10 if you have a job or a family or both. And so I think there's a very important role for people like Josh and Liz.
So to wind up, Is there a question, Liz, that you have for me or Jackie? We didn't really prepare this part, so.
I guess, well, one, Jackie, how are you feeling going into your auctions next week? Just generally now that we've seen how Christie's did last night.
It's so funny, it's like it's such a roller coaster of emotions because you sit in these interest meetings every day, and one day there's no interest, and the next day there's a ton of interest, and then it all comes off, and then it goes back on, and so you really don't know what's going to happen until a little bit closer to the time. But I do think that there's some incredible pieces that we're really excited about. I mean, you talk about works that you only have one opportunity, or very few opportunities to buy. Like, we're selling this Wayne Thiebaud, where we realized in our research that Thiebaud only made 10 large dessert paintings, and most of those are in museums. So, that's a piece that I'm very excited about. I think we have some great young material. So I don't know, we're feeling really, really good about it. And the Henry Taylor is something really special. That Basquiat is unbelievable. We're feeling excited.
Jackie, do you have a question for your fellow panelists? You've got them on
What
tape
are you bidding
live.
on?
I'll give you my bids. No, there are a lot of things I think that are really interesting in the Mo Austin collection and the Gerald Feinberg collection at Christie's. And
Yes.
the Sturdivant at Phillips, I think, is a major, major, very interesting picture. I probably shouldn't have put my cards on the table.
The two Magrittes in the Mo Austin collection just slay me. And actually, so does
Cecily Brown.
the Cecily Brown. There are actually some really great women artists. The Cecily Brown, the Joan Mitchell is a stunner. So I'm very excited about that
Oh, I
collection.
said Glenn Ligon here.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Super cool.
That's really
that's
good.
a really rare painting.
Yeah. That's a very, very rare opportunity.
But that might be.
Two major Picasso prints that are being offered
Yes.
in the context of these collections.
Yeah.
And it's rare that you see that in a season.
So, any headwinds that you see? I mean, everybody's always asking, the economy is this, and we've got real shit going on in the world between Russia and Ukraine. We have one candidate who can't even say who should win the war. Sorry to some of you in the audience. And
We might default.
And what's going on? It feels like the art market just keeps rolling on. Have we hit a new point where it's going to roll on forever?
I think we all keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, and by all I mean all. But then you have a night like last night where you feel okay. There's the prices are down. Have come down a little bit, but as you said, like $500 million is nothing to turn your nose up at. I mean, it feels to me like collectors find great art to be a secure place to put their money.
The caveat I would say is, I hear all the time from collectors, what do you think about the art market? And that's not really the question that they mean. They mean, what about my shit?
100%.
Absolutely.
So the market was
100%.
great last night, unless you were the one person selling that Picasso that was meant to be $20 million and didn't sell. Who cares about the Rousseau and the O'Keeffe prices? Right. You went home. And we're actually in a healthier place now where not everything's going to sell. So that seems like actually when 80 to 90% sells, that's healthier because there is some standard there of the price, the quality, the provenance that matters. So I think we're almost in a better spot.
Right, like it's not like hysterical. There's not like a
Internet's bubble of stocks where everybody's a genius. I mean, you're a genius, but...
And you're a genius.
And Jackie's a genius.
So on that mutual genius front, I think we're going to wind it up. We hope that you enjoyed this. We'll have this available through Sotheby's and through the Baer Faxt. And thank you, Sotheby's, again, for producing this report that spurred some interesting questions. And we'll look back in a week or two and see what really happened. So thank you, the new OGs of Orange County.
The original OG.
Yeah, with the
OOG.
The OOG.
The OOGs. Signing out.
Bye.
Bye.